Hi everyone, my name is Jude Williams and today we're going to have a look at mixing colours using paint. There's 3 key takeaways from today's session. You're going to learn some useful information on brushes and types of paint, how to mix different colours and tones, and how to apply hints and tips that I give you to your own paintings to improve them. There are a number of keywords that I'd like you to have a look at and remember for this session, and maybe write a quick definition of them at the end of the session to recap on your learning. The keywords we're going to have a look at today are poster paints, watercolour paints, acrylic paints, tints, shades and tones. Some of you may have seen my previous 2 videos or lessons on mixing colours using colour pencil and also the theory of the colour wheel. If you have, I encourage you to use some of the keywords that you've used in those lessons. If you haven't, I would definitely encourage you to watch those lessons as well, because it will help you. Colour theory is extremely important in art. In most of art, there is no rules, but we want to remember some key things. They aren't exactly rules, but they are things to remember when you're painting or drawing. So let's get started. So I'm going to be using some different paintbrushes today. These are just a few from my collection at home. I often use the Daler-Rowney brushes, but it is up to you on which brushes you would like to use. These ones are the flat brushes that I generally use. As you can see, they say what type of brush they are on the handle of the brush. So we've got 2 long flat brushes, but of different widths. We have a short flat brush, and then we also have a Skyflow brush. I generally use these for larger areas. Next, we have the thinner round brushes. So we've got the very, very thin point for details, and then we've got bigger brushes, which I tend to use with watercolours. But for today, we are going to use this brush, just a very simple 1/2-inch brush, just a flat brush. You can use whatever you've got at home and whatever paper you've got at home as well. So there are different types of paints that you could use. A lot of you will recognise these paints from school. As you can see, the one on the left-hand side, the smaller paint palette, has been used extensively. And then the more new palette on the right-hand side even has the little description of all the different paints that are in there, all the different names of those paints. It's up to you what you use, but I would say that for practicing, watercolours can be quite tricky. I would encourage you to get something like this. These are very, very easy and cheap paints to get. These are called poster paints, and they are from these ones happen to be mine that I use at home, and they're just from a normal supermarket. They're not too expensive. I think for about 300 millilitres, these were around £1 each. So I would encourage you to just buy the 3 primary colours, and that's the ones we're going to be using today. Hopefully you remember those 3 primary colours: red, blue and yellow. You can of course buy other colours if you can. I would definitely recommend buying the 3 primary colours, red, blue and yellow, and also buying white and black if you can. So these are the colours that I'm going to be using today. As you can see, I've poured out the acrylic paints, which are a bit thicker than some of the other paints, which makes them easier for blending and mixing and getting a deep, even layer of vibrant colour. I would suggest using acrylic paints or using the poster paints, but please bear in mind that acrylic paints are difficult to get off clothing, so I would suggest wearing some old clothing or even an apron if you have it. Let's have a look now at what we will be painting. So I've made a quick video here, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about how to mix those colours to create all the different colours of the colour wheel. So I'm going to talk you through my video now. So this is mixing colours using acrylic paints. Again, like I said, you can use watercolours, but this is the kind of effect you may have. So it's quite pale, it's quite wishy-washy. If you want that effect, go for it. But I am going to be using acrylics to create this colour wheel. So I start off with my 3 primary colours. I've got my yellow here, starting to paint that on. It's quite a thick paint, so you can spread it out to create an even layer. I'm doing 2 layers on here just to make sure I've got a nice even coating. And then I'm going in with my red. Next, I'm going to start to mix an equal amount of yellow and an equal amount of red. You'll notice how I get those colours from the sides of my little blobs of paint, and then I mix them together. So I put my palette down. You don't have to have a fancy palette. This is just a plastic pot lid. And then I start to mix those colours together. So I'm pushing all of that colour into the centre and then mixing them. I make sure that it's all mixed in together by twizzling my brush and making sure it's all mixed before I put it on the paper. So there we see equal parts of 2 primary colours, yellow and red, make the colour orange. It doesn't look as orangey here on the video as it did in real life, but I encourage you to practice and create different types of orange. As you can see here, this is more of a red orange. Almost looks very similar to red, but see here where I join it to the orange colour, you can see the very subtle difference. Next, I'm going to add some yellow into that orange colour that I mixed before. And this is going to create our yellow-orange tone. There we go, sort of yellow-orange, a lighter sort of orange, more of a yellow tone in it. And that is our kind of hot colours on our colour wheel. Next, I'm going to go in with the blue. Just getting an even coat in there. And then I'm going to start to mix it with one of the other primary colours. I've decided that I'm going to mix a equal amount of blue with an equal amount of yellow to make a green colour. I do have to put a little bit more yellow in because, as we know, the darker tones can be a bit stronger. So the blue tone is a little bit stronger than the yellow here. So I've mixed my green and I'm painting that on. And then I'm using a little bit more blue, adding in more blue to that green colour to make the sort of blue-green colour. Now I'm going for a more lime green, so that yellow-green colour, mixing in more yellow. As you can see, when I start painting it on, it doesn't look as pale as I would like. I would like it to have a bit more yellow in tone. So I put a bit more yellow and almost mix it on the paper. There we go, that's a little bit more lime green, which is more of the colour I would like. The last bit I'm going to do is this purple tone. So again, I'm mixing the blue and the red, the 2 primary colours, to mix that purple tone in the middle. Then popping that just between the blue and the red. Next, I'm going to go for the red purple. So I've added a bit more red into that purple colour. And as you can see, it is slightly darker than the red tone that I put on originally. And then our last colour in our colour wheel is this dark sort of purple tone. So the blue purple, almost a navy colour. I would encourage you all to create your own colour wheels using whatever paints you have at home. It really helps for you to understand how you can create all of those different colours using just the 3 primary colours. Next, we're going to have a look at tints and shades. So some of you who may have seen some of my videos before, you will have seen that tints are adding white to a colour and shades are adding black to a colour. So in this video, I'm showing you how to add those tints and shades of red. So here we've got, starting off with our red colour, and then I'm using white here. But as you can see, I still had a little bit of that red on my paintbrush, so creating a pale pink tone. Next, I'm adding only a slight bit of white to create that slightly lighter tint of red. And then I'm going in for lighter again. Each time I'm adding a little bit more white to my red colour that I've created. Now we're starting to get into the more pinky tones that are heavily reliant on that white colour mixed with the red. Next, I'm going to go into the shades. So I start off with my red as well. And then I'm going to start to add some black. But remember what we said last time in our lessons, black is our most powerful colour. We just want to add it slowly and simply to start to create those different tones and shades. As you can see, this colour looks almost black. And the last colour, it's hard to see on the video, but the last colour looks like it's black, but it actually has a hint of that red tone in it. I would definitely encourage you to do this with many of your other colours that you've created, not just the primaries. So this is the palette that I am going to be showing you now. I am just using the 3 primary colours of yellow, red and blue, but I'm also using quite a bit of white. Now, the reason I'm using these 4 colours are to show you how you can create different skin tones using just these 4 colours. A lot of my pupils tell me that skin tone is really, really difficult for them to do. So we're going to have a little look at how I create different skin tones. Remember that it is all about experimentation. So as much as I can show you, please try and do this for yourself as well. So I'm starting with equal parts of the yellow, red and blue. I wonder if you can guess what colour that's going to make. Equal parts of the primary colours. When we mix that together in the middle of the palette, it'll slowly start to become a brown colour. So as you can see, I'm moving all of those sections of paint into the centre, making sure I'm not leaving any bits of paint not mixed in. And there we can see a sort of brown colour. It's like a rich brown, isn't it? It's got quite a bit of red in it, that brown. Once I've mixed that brown colour, that forms my basis for all of my skin colours that I create. So let's have a look now at me mixing those colours on my paper. I start off with that brown colour. Again, I said it had quite a bit of red in it. We can see that earthy tone. So when I add white to this on the paper, let's see what kind of colour it turns out. I had my white on the paper. As you can see, I've still had a bit of brown on my brush. And that does create a light kind of brown faded colour. It's a tint of brown, isn't it? Because we've got the white. I'm going to scrape up a little bit of excess into my palette because I might use that colour later. We don't want to be washing our brushes too much because you might use some of that colour later on. We can see here that this colour actually has a little bit too much red in it. It's a little bit too warm. So we need to counteract that by adding a little bit of yellow. So I'm going to start to add that yellow on top of the colour I've already done. If you work quite quickly with oils, with acrylic paint, sorry, you can actually mix them on the paper as well. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm starting to mix that colour in the middle. So now we can see it's almost going a sort of fawny colour. This reminds me of my foundation that I use. And if I hold my hand up to it, you can see how I'm starting to get that more yellowish tone. I'm going to add a little bit more white here and try and get an even paler tone. It's almost like an ivory sort of tone on there. And this is why it's very important to mix those colours and try them out, to have something as a reference for you. I'm going to add a little bit more white here. create that really, really nice light highlight that you may use on the face. And again, keep checking as to something in real life or a photographic reference. You can see now I'm starting to get the highlights, midtones and shadows. The next bit I wanted to show you is how a lot of pupils doing painting can get confused. A lot of the time we are taught, or we have seen through our lives, that pink is usually the tone used for a skin colour. But as we know, there are many, many skin colours, and actually pink is not really seen in many skin tones. We usually have a sort of brown skin tone or a yellow undertone to our skin. So here I've been starting to mix up a little bit of a pinky tone, and you can see that those colours don't quite work together. We need this colour that almost looks like a foundation, almost looks like makeup, this sort of fawn colour. I'm adding the white here to mix a paler tone of that fawn, so that tint of the fawn colour. But again, that would only be used for highlights, say sections here or sections here on the cheekbones, or maybe sections on the nose. Again, I'm adding white to show you those different highlights that could be created. And then I'm also going to show you those darker tones as well. So getting a bit more of a sort of red tone in the skin. And then also adding a little bit more of the blue colour. So getting those sort of darker tones within the skin. Here I've added a bit more of the yellow and the blue together. I often have a lot of students who create these different tonal swatches. So that's a page filled with different tones and tints and shades. And often my students will label what paints they've used or what ratios they've used. That is what I expect a palette to look like at the end, quite messy, full of lots and lots of variation in tones. And these are the things I was talking about, swatches. I create swatches for all of the paintings that I make. I practice making different colours, and then I paint them onto a small section of paper, so I can hold these up against my reference picture or against the model that I'm using. I would highly recommend you do this just by cutting strips of paper, painting on the different tones you've created, different shades and tints, and then folding the paper over so that you can use this to layer on top of your reference pictures or use it to put up to the skin of your model. So now we're going on to my hints and tips. I would always recommend you using a reference photo. It's really important that you either reference from a photograph or from real life. Then you have something to reference for your colours. You're able to use those swatches as we talked about just now, and you're able to lift those up against the picture or the model that you have. I would also recommend applying your paint thinly first. It's really important that if you apply it thinly first, if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. You can always paint over it. Though saying that, I would always recommend for you, if you make a mistake, leave it till it is dry and then go over it later on. It's much easier to correct things when the first layer, the mistake layer, is dry. I would recommend you having 2 water pots as well. I would have one water pot with fresh water in, and the other water pot is for you to mix your brushes in. So just to get most of the paint off. Get most of the paint off in your first water pot, and then take it into your second water pot where you can just get the last bit off. So you generally have the clean water last on your brush. As I've said in most of my videos, please create colour wheels, create swatches. They help you so much by not just rushing into a painting or a picture, by testing out the colours that you've got. You may be extremely lucky and have a massive range of different coloured paints that you can use, or you may only be able to have the 3 primary colours and white and black. If you're not able to have those, I would definitely just recommend having the 3 primary colours, yellow, blue and red, and a white. You can generally make most of the other colours that you will need just using those 4, red, yellow, blue and white. You can even create a dark, almost black tone using the 3 primary colours. As we said, mixing blue, yellow and red creates a brown tone. But if you mix those with a little bit more blue, you will start to create that darker tone, that almost black tone. And remember, in most realistic paintings and drawings, we generally don't see a true black. We generally see a blue black or a brown black or a red black. I would highly recommend that you make a conscious decision about what sort of colour scheme you are using in your paintings. Do you want your paintings to have contrasting colours? Do you want them to have harmonious colours? Have a look at the colour scheme that you are using in your painting and decide whether that evokes the emotions that you want your painting to show to your viewer. Let's recap on our learning for today. So the useful information on brushes and types of paint that we've learned. You must choose the right type of brush for your painting. If you're doing larger areas, use a flat brush. And if you're doing those little tiny details on top, use a round brush. Use watercolours if you would like a paler effect, but then you can also layer those colours. So do 1 layer of watercolour, wait for it to dry. Do the next layer of watercolour, wait for it to dry. You can layer up watercolour quite a lot on your paintings to create a darker, deeper colour. If you want to create a more vibrant, even layer of colour, I would definitely recommend using a thicker paint. So poster or acrylic paint. Remember those little hints and tips I told you earlier. Poster paint is generally water-based and easier to get off your clothes. Acrylic paint is water-based as well, but it also has sort of plastic involved in the making of the paint, which can make it difficult to get off clothing. Next, how to mix different colours and tones. Well, as I said, experiment with creating your own colour palette using what other colours you've got at home. Experiment with using a restricted palette. Don't let yourself use all of those secondary colours, orange, green and purple. Try and create those colours just using your primary colours. Remember, primary colours can create secondary and tertiary colours. If you add white to a hue, it becomes a tint, and if you add black, it becomes a shade. For skin tones, start off by mixing all the primary colours together to create a brown, and then experiment with adding white or small additions of each of the primary colours to see what sort of tones you can create. And then lastly, how to apply the hints and tips to your paintings. There are multiple tips and hints that I could give you, but generally stick to these couple of hints and tips, and I'm sure that your paintings will become much, much better. So use a reference photo or print from real life. That really helps you to match those colours. Maybe that could be a challenge for yourself over the next few weeks. Print off a reference photo and try and match those colours exactly. Apply your paint thinly at first so you can build up the colour. Remember, if you do make a mistake, you can paint over them when they're dry. Use 2 water pots, as I've said, one to mix your paintbrush in straight away to get most of the paint off, and then one to sort of clean it before you go into your next colour. Use your colour wheel. I use my colour wheels by sticking them up next to the paintings that I am painting so that I can reference back to them. Make swatches of colour, just like I showed you with the skin colour swatches, so that you can match those to your reference photo or from your model in real life. Make a conscious decision about your colour scheme. Look at the different colours in terms of their contrasts, if they're complementary, if they're harmonious, if they're next to each other on the colour wheel, and decide what sort of emotion and feeling you want your viewer to have from your painting. But as with everything, please just practice. Just enjoy and use the materials that you have. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me. Enjoy painting. Bye.